You are good to go, Martha.
Thank you, Greg. Welcome, everybody. This is the July 1st meeting of the Tompkins Intergovernmental Relations Committee. Thank you all for joining us. And right up front, we do have a couple of changes to the agenda. I had sent out an update right after it got published. The agenda got published in our meeting portal because I had got confirmation from a couple of speakers after Kathy Covert published the original agenda. So I hope everybody has seen that. We emailed that a couple of times, but we have a change even to that. Amanda Spellacy was supposed to be our first speaker from Senator Chuck Schumer's office. Unfortunately, she is sick today, not COVID, just stomach flu. So she won't be joining us, but she said she will definitely try to make our next meeting. And we were able to add Ryan Gregoire to the agenda. He was scheduled for 12:05 and graciously said that he could move up and extend his time with us today. So in a minute, I will introduce Ryan. I also want to welcome Henry Grandison and Mike Lane as sort of have signed on as committee members. Leslyn McBean-Claiborne Chair will have to officially appoint them at the next legislature meeting, so I'll make sure that that happens. So we will be a committee of 7. So with that, Katrina, you are staffing us today. Do we have any public comment? Have you seen anything? Okay, I haven't seen anything either. Thank you very much. So let me introduce Ryan. Welcome, Ryan. It's great to have you here. Ryan has worked with us for a couple of years at NYSAC. He's been the New York State Association of Counties, been the main staff person for the Public Safety Committee. So a few of us know him well through that committee at NYSAC. And just in general, he's been a great resource and sort of partner on strategy, on messaging, on just information and what do we know and how can we make things happen. So Ryan is the legislative director of NYSAC, and he has a slide deck, but also has an update from the National Association of Counties. So take it away, Ryan. We really are grateful that you're here and look forward to all the information that you've got to share. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, Chairwoman Robertson, and welcome everyone. Hello. Thank you guys all for having me today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get the presentation going.
And I'll mention that I emailed this to everybody yesterday, so it's in your inboxes.
Okay, Martha, can you just confirm that you can hear me, see me, and see the PowerPoint?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to walk through an end of session update for everyone, and particularly focused on issues of county concern. And then, as Martha mentioned, I will provide an update, some new information that I have from the National Association of Counties. And I should mention that NYSAC, myself, Stephen Aquario, our executive director, Dave Lucas, and all the counties, including Martha and Jason Molino, and a number of county legislators in Tompkins County, have been actively engaging with our peers across the country, across the state, to really ramp up our federal advocacy these last few months. So I'm happy to discuss that as well. And just real quick, here's the agenda for today's presentation. I want to start off by just recapping what happened during the state budget process with respect to the governor's new powers to modify his budget as the year goes on due to revenue shortfall projections from the coronavirus pandemic. And then I want to talk about some end of session legislative updates, some county budget data points that Dave Lucas in our office compiled for us, and of course, really focus on the federal stimulus proposals. I'm going to spend most of my time on bullet number 2 and bullet number 4. Okay, so the new executive authority to cut spending, just real quick to bring everyone up to speed on this. the governor is currently targeting an $8.1 billion reduction in state and local aid and state and local assistance. So this is a pretty significant shortfall in his projection. You've probably seen press statements where the governor has said that if Washington doesn't act, I'm going to be forced to make 20% across the board cuts in education, in the Medicaid program, and reductions to state and or reductions to local state aid. So without congressional action, there's going to be an impact on county budgets in this fiscal year and potentially most likely in fiscal year 21. So that'll be a consideration that everyone across the state has to monitor. You know, let's see, it's July 1st today. So your county managers, county executives are actively working with department heads right now and with their county legislators to start crafting that budget proposal. And I know that Tompkins County is one of the first counties out of the gate to form their county budget. So NISAC is staying in close contact with the legislature, staying in close contact with the governor, trying to get updates on this issue. We're actually meeting with Todd Sherman next week, who is the Secretary of Senate Finance, and Blake Washington, who is the Secretary of Assembly Ways and Means, which is the equivalent. They're basically, you can think of those two individuals as the state Senate and state Assembly budget directors for the majority conference. They're the ones who help the Senate Majority Leader and Assembly Speaker negotiate with the governor during that budget process. So they're really key figures. They shape the way the budget works. They shape what the legislature buys back, what they're willing to give. So, and they were instrumental in forming this year's state budget as well. So in 2018, counties received about $3.1 billion in state reimbursements, which represents about 12.4% of total county revenue. And that varied from 7.1 to 26.4%, depending on where you were located in the state. If the executive ends up reducing local aid between 20 and 50%, that would be a net impact to county budgets between 600 million and 1.5 billion. Quite significant. So this is something that the governor has not released his spending cut plan yet. However, many of you, I'm sure, are aware that the governor has temporarily reduced state aid reimbursements to counties by 20%. And Martha had asked me to give an update on that. And when we might see a full restoration of those funds, as well as there's another component, and I'll talk about this when we get to the Medicaid portion in the next few slides, but I'll wait to hold on the Medicaid piece. But at this point, the governor has not officially put out a plan on how he's going to intend to cut, if at all, the 20% from local aid. Where counties are caught right now in a game of cat and mouse between the governor and the president and Congress right now. The governor is trying to apply pressure on our congressional delegation, but more importantly on Senate Republicans and the president to really push them to the table to negotiate a state and local aid package. And like I said, I have an ACO update. I'll talk about this when I get to bullet number 4. But this is something that I want everyone to be aware of, that we're caught in a little bit of a political game with our colleagues in Washington, D.C. Okay, I'm going to just skip this slide because this gets into the weeds of the mechanism of how the governor can make those cuts and how he can restore the cuts. But everyone should know that once the plan goes into place, if he does end up reducing state aid by 20% in various buckets, mental health, social services, CHIPS, really any program that you receive state aid from could be reduced by 20% right now. He does have the ability to provide that match back up to the 100% threshold that was included in the budget if federal revenues or if state revenues come in back closer to his projected levels. So it's just something to be aware of. He can restore those cuts, either fully or partially. On Medicaid, so this is what I was talking about a moment ago. There was some really good news, and Martha, I want to thank you for really pushing Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand and our congressional delegation to get this done. We worked, well into the hours of the night through March with our partners at NACO, Deborah Cox and Matt Chase, to really get this included as part of the second coronavirus federal stimulus bill, HR 6201. What this provision does is it increases the Medicaid federal contribution from 50% in New York State's case to 56.2%. Now, by doing that, it gives the state an additional 6.2%, which is about $2.5 billion worth of assistance. But because counties pay into the Medicaid program, we are entitled to receive a share of those FMAP payments. And Tompkins County received their letter last week describing how they would receive that enhanced benefit. The governor has released those funds. Every county across the state has received the same letter. Obviously, it's different based on the share of your individual county's contribution to the Medicaid program. But what's going to happen is over the next 40 weeks, from now until March 31st, 2021, the state is going to reduce the weekly share of your Medicaid payments. And by doing so, that's the mechanism that they're giving you this enhanced FMAP benefit. So that's good news. It was approved by Congress, it was signed by the president, and now it's being released by the state government. I want to make note of a caveat in this, though. The state is about 3 years behind in ACA FMAP reconciliation payments. So when the Affordable Care Act was passed, there was an enhanced Medicaid match for states who had already expanded their eligible population for the Medicaid program. New York State was one of them. I believe there was only one other state, Minnesota, who had expanded beyond the beyond the new program scope that the federal government put in place with ACA. The way the program works is New York State, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but the way the program works is New York State reimburses counties 80% of their projected value of that ACA enhanced match. And then at the end of the year, they do a 20%, the remaining 20% is done through a reconciliation process to see, okay, what was your actual spend in Tompkins County? And do you owe us money or do we need to give you more money? So they withhold 20% of the funds because rather than making the county make a payment if there was a negative balance, they instead say, okay, we're just not going to share with you a percentage of that remainder. So each year the county either gets some savings back or they might not get any. But that's the way the state has structured this program. Well, we're sitting on 3 years worth of reconciliation payments right now, which is about 500 to 600 million is the estimate from NISAC. That's the value statewide. It's troubling because the state has already done the work behind the scenes. New York State Department of Health, the Medicaid unit, has already done the work behind the scenes to do this reconciliation, but they haven't released the funds. So we're concerned about that because they're due to counties. And we need that money right now desperately because our revenues have come in well short of projections right now.
Ryan, if I can do a time check, not sure which slide you're on, but I know you had 40. A lot of them is way too much detail to talk about, and you quickly. But we really could go till 12:30 on this part of the meeting. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Martha. I will continue our advancing them. Real quick, I just wanted to mention a couple bills, and I want to draw everyone's attention to our NISAC end of session report on bills that the legislature has passed. If you go to our NISAC website, nisac.org/legislative, it'll take you to the page that you can download that report. So all of this information I'm about to quickly go through is included in that report. I encourage you to go and take a look at that. Just real quick, these are some, and everyone has this presentation, so feel free to take a look at this. But these were just some bills that I wanted to highlight that the legislature has acted on. And I'll just thumb through these quickly. And what I'll mention is this session, this post-budget legislative session at the state level has been a little different than historical years because of the coronavirus impact. Typically what happens is after the state budget, they take a couple weeks off, the legislature does, and then they return and pass a series of other bills throughout the rest of the year. Well, that process has really been truncated this year, and they've really only focused on two packages. These slides here, the next few slides are going to speak to the second package. But the first package they did was about 30 bills that address the COVID-19 response. The legislature really wanted to take some initiative on spearheading some efforts to try and help individuals, help families, help communities with working through the COVID-19 impact. So they passed 30 bills, and that was done in the later part of May. And then they returned a few weeks later in June to pass a series of police reform bills in the wake of the murder and the tragic death of Mr. Floyd in Minnesota. So that was their two buckets they've worked on. I have been told by my contacts within the legislature that they do intend to return after the July 4th recess. They don't have a specific date when they're going to return, and they don't have an agenda of what bills they're going to pass, but we have continued to advocate for county home rule bills that are outstanding. There's not too many of them, but there are some. So we've advocated for passing those county home rule bills, as well as a number of our bills that NISAC supports. And I encourage you, stay tuned. Within the next week or so, NISAC is going to be publishing our 2020 legislative program update, which is going to be similar to our regular legislative program, but it's going to strip out the budget impact legislation or budget request, and it's going to focus solely on our legislative priorities and new bills that have been introduced that we also support this year. So these are just a few bills. Right now, I'm going to highlight these quickly, some bills to keep an eye on, and then I'll show you our top 10 list. There is an early retirement incentive bill. There was some initial confusion around the state. Folks had thought that the Senate and Assembly had passed this bill. It is not passed. It's only been introduced, and it just picked up the Senate sponsor, Senator Martinez from Suffolk and Nassau County. So this is a starting point. I don't want you to get your hopes up. This is an initial starting point that the legislature has thrown out there. There's not a three-way agreement on this. We don't know where the executive stands yet, but it would create the ability for counties to offer a temporary retirement incentive to their employees. And the way it would work is, as long as the employee is 55 years of age and has 25 years of service, they would be eligible for that regular 30-year benefit. And then for every year that they work in state service, so say they work 25 years, they would also be entitled to a 25-month additional credit for their retirement incentive. So, but again, this is preliminary. I would not take this as anything close to being a final negotiation. It's just a starting point. There's a second bill that you've probably seen in the newspapers. It's drawn a lot of attention. Mayor de Blasio in New York City, who's a member of NISAC, we've really been working closely with them to try and give them this authority. New York City has a $9 billion budget shortfall, and their budget actually was just passed last night. So what they're seeking is, and this has actually been amended since this slide was developed yesterday, they're now seeking a $5 billion authority to borrow against operating aid. So that's something different than what counties have sought in the past, what New York City has sought in the past. The governor is very reluctant to give them the authority to borrow against operating aid. So if that's something that Tompkins County is considering, I just want to flag that for your radar. It's likely not something that the governor is going to easily go along with. And then there's a bill, Senate Bill 8292, which creates some amendments to the paid sick leave program. And this is a bill that NYSHO and NYSAC co-sponsor with our legislative partners and Assemblywoman Nolan and Senator Rivera. This legislation clarifies that individuals who are subject to precautionary quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19 receive those benefits that were outlined in the PSL law that passed earlier. There's a little confusion on that. Our health directors, our health commissioners requested this amendment, and the legislature has picked up quite a number of sponsors on this. It's a good bill. It's a very good bill. It clarifies a lot of issues for us. It helps employees. It helps individuals who are facing this COVID-19 virus. Okay, and then here is our top 10 priority bills. And again, this is going to be included in our 2020 program, which will come out in a couple weeks. And you all have a copy of this. If you click on these links here, they're hyperlinks directly to the bill if you're interested. If you would like to have Assemblywoman Lou Pardo sponsor them, we would love to have her support. Obviously, you can see there's a couple bills here that she sponsors. But, if you want to engage with your state delegation, that would be great too.
Yeah, our Assemblywoman is Barbara Lifton.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Barbara Lifton.
Lou Pardo's our neighbor.
Yes. So we would love to have Barbara Lifton join as well. I'm going to skip through this. This is just talking to some impacts on local revenues. We're looking at some pretty significant shortfalls in revenues in addition to state aid that I mentioned earlier. Gaming and VLT could be up to an $83 million impact, occupancy tax, $79 million across the state, and of course, sales tax, which is one of the biggest sources of county revenue, could be really hit hard. We have a NYSAC COVID-19 economic impact analysis report on our website. If you have questions specifically to this, I'm happy to share a copy of that with you. Okay. So again, I just want to go through this quickly here. Okay, so pension, I just want to spend a moment on this. The average contribution rate for 2020 right now is 14.6% for the pension obligation. This is one of those significant cost drivers in your budget. We don't have the number yet from the comptroller's office. It doesn't come until late August, which makes it incredibly frustrating and difficult for budget planning purposes. I know that you all and Jason and your budget and Commissioner of Finance wish they had that number much earlier. And we've asked the comptroller to give us at least a range earlier, but we know that the pension fund is likely to be reduced this year due to the stock market and other factors. So we know that the employer contribution rate will likely go up. It will be higher than 14.6%. We don't know how much. Dave Lucas here on this slide, on slide 32 at the bottom, that last bullet, NYSAC projects a 5-year investment return could fall by 3 to 4%, which means that the rate could increase by several percentage points. So that's something to keep in mind. That's, a significant cost driver in county budgets. All right.
I've got Shauna Black has her hand up.
Sure.
Good question.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you, Martha. I had a question. A few slides back, you had noted NYSAC opposes the HALT Act. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, so, and I'm happy to talk about that. This bill, the HALT Act, we're trying to work with Senator Sepulveda and Assemblyman Aubrey on this bill. The reason why we oppose, it has nothing to do with the merits of the legislation. And I also believe that the sheriffs are perfectly fine with the merits of the bill. The issue is there's a provision in there which would require counties to retrofit certain wings of their jails to create a certain special, I forget the exact name of it, but it's essentially like a mental health service unit, which again, we want those services in the county jail, especially now because the census is down. So we have the flexibility to do that. The problem is the governor came out with an estimate that it would cost the counties about $980 million to do that, in the state, because the state would be subject to this in their state prisons, another $500 to $600 million. So the only objection we have is to the cost. That being said, the sponsors really want to get this done, and they want to try and force the governor to include some funding for this. They recognize that cost. So I think what's going to end up happening is, I don't know if the bill will pass this session. I don't think it will, but what I do think will happen is the sponsors are going to include that as part of their budget request next year. So if that comes along with some funding, we're perfectly fine with it.
Okay, and then the above, the MAT Act, what's the hold up there? Because I know that we've received funding through some of these bills, and they've been very helpful.
Yeah. So, and thankfully the governor did continue some funding for the MAT program expansions in county jails. It's about $4.5 million to counties, which is good. That's great. And we have been working with CLMHD, which is the association who represents the mental hygiene directors, or your director of community services, really on this bill. And again, we have no issue with the merits of the program. The Sheriff's Association objects because they don't want controlled medicine like MAT in their prison or in their county jails. We're not weighing in on that at all. We're staying clear of the medical professionals that are providing this medication to inmates. We're not getting involved with that. It simply comes down to the projected cost to offer all forms of MAT in the county jail, which is somewhere between $60 and $70 million. That was the estimate from the mental hygiene directors. But again, Senator Bailey and Assemblywoman Rosenthal know that that's the only point of issue that counties have. So this was something that they advocated for inclusion in this year's budget. Obviously, I think the governor pushed back because of revenue issues with coronavirus. But I think that this bill, again, will come up next year. And this is going to be a number one, or not maybe a number one, but a high priority of them to get some funding for. So, and we will, we will be strong in our support for funding for both of these bills.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as far as the MAT goes, like, what is your distinction? I mean, I understand the sheriffs don't want to do it. They're not necessarily on board for the most progressive actions that the counties take. Why would you listen to them over perhaps, the people or the legislators in the counties?
Yeah. So, and like I said, we're not objecting for the reasons the Sheriff's Association is. We're just focused on the costs of implementing the program.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
Mike, Mike Sigler, if you have is this a clarification? I think we're going to get into discussion. I think let's wait till Brian's gone through all his materials. Do you have?
Well, it was kind of a clarification. I right at the beginning, you brought out a number that we were looking at $8.1 billion in cuts.
Yeah,
potentially. It's just if I remember right, I mean, we were starting off in the hole $6.5 billion before any of this happened. So does that mean that we're only after all this, 1.6 billion in the hole? I'm having trouble reconciling those two numbers. So. Yeah.
So I wish the answer to that, Mike, was yes, but unfortunately it's not. So what happened was, you're right. There's a $6.5 billion hole in the state budget going into this year, before coronavirus happened. The state budget rectified that problem, and there was a bunch of different ways that they came to a balanced budget. However, since the coronavirus epidemic really took off, the governor came out and said, well, that now the enacted budget has a $15 billion, between 12.5 and $15 billion hole. So because of that, he's saying if I don't get assistance from Washington, then I'm going to have to cut the local aid program by $8.1 billion. And that local aid program includes things like education funding, Medicaid funding. The local aid program just isn't county funding. It's more inclusive in the state budget. It includes all those little different types of programs. But our state aid would be impacted as well. Yeah.
Great
That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. I've wondered about that myself. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ryan.
Great. Okay, so I wanted to focus on the federal relief bills right now. There's been 4 bills that have passed. The fourth one, some people call it 3.5. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's just semantics. But the first, this is just a slide that shows the overview of all 4 of them that have passed. I'm going to just talk about some particular details on each of them. So the first bill was signed into law on March 6th. This was the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriation Act. This was the initial out of the gate $7.8 billion package. It included some funding to your local public health departments. So Tompkins County Public Health would have received a grant to assist with some costs that the county would be incurring to pay for PPE, as well as administer some of the public health functions to help folks with the COVID-19 pandemic. So there was a little bit of money that came out through this package. It wasn't a lot. Again, it was $7.8 billion across the country. Phase 2, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, this was the bill I talked about earlier, was signed into law a couple weeks later. And this is where that EF-MAP increase was included, that 6.2% increase. They also expanded the WIC eligibility, and they did their federal paid sick leave program as part of this bill. Phase 3, a week later, was the big bill. This is the CARES Act. So this is the bill that has attracted a lot of media attention. It was a massive piece of legislation. It included the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which for counties with a population greater than 500,000, they received a significant amount of money to help with COVID-19 expenses. Only COVID-19 expenses are eligible. It extends the expiration of TANF. It included a $45 billion FEMA disaster relief fund, which your county can apply for. It does include a 25% local match on that fund. However, we're working with the state to try and, on 2 angles. The state is pushing the president and the administration to eliminate that 25% local match. Fingers crossed that comes through. If it doesn't, we've asked the state, because the state has received about $5.5 billion worth of money through the CARES Act, to use a portion of that money to eliminate that 25% local match requirement. That would be a big lift off of the shoulders of county governments and other local municipalities. So that's something we're asking. There was
Ryan, you said New York State got $5.5 billion in CARES.
Yeah,
okay.
$5.5 billion, and the counties, and this was mostly through the Coronavirus Relief Fund, received $1.5 billion. So New York State in aggregate received about $7 billion in change. It's a little more than $7 billion. I think it was $7.2 billion. But the governor has said that $5.5 billion, which again can only be used for COVID-19 expenses, that's not enough funding. He's looking for local unrestricted aid, which I'm getting there. That's the big ask at the end here. This bill also included that $600 benefit in federal unemployment insurance, that pandemic unemployment insurance, on top of the maximum state unemployment benefit of $504. So that was significant. That was included in the CARES Act. And it also included the initial round of the EIDA and PPP loan programs, which are administered through the Small Business Administration. That was an initial allocation of $377 billion. If you remember, there was a lot of news articles that talked about how that money went out the door and it was spent rather quickly. So that gets us to 3.5, which was signed about a little less than a month later. That included the additional $370 billion for the PPP program. And that deadline last night was, or actually June 30th. So yes, yesterday was the deadline for this program. However, the president just signed a bill, an emergency bill extending that authority till I believe the end of August, or towards the end of August. I'll have to check on that specific date. I don't recall off the top of my head, but he extended the deadline of the PPP program. No more money, just extended the deadline. And it also added an additional $75 billion for hospitals on top of the $100 billion fund in the CARES Act, and it appropriated $25 billion for virus testing. That was 3.5. At this point in time, mid-April is when NISAC really ramped up our advocacy efforts with Congress to try and get state and local unrestricted aid included as part of this bill. We were promised by the congressional delegation, and they tried very hard. All of them did. Every single member of the New York delegation was actively pushing leadership, both parties, to do this. Well, we didn't get it done, but that gets us to phase 4/phase 5 negotiations. And HR 6800, the HEROES Act, was a piece of legislation sponsored by Nita Lowey. She's the chair of the House Appropriations Committee from Westchester, Putnam, and Rockland counties in New York State. And she partnered with Speaker Pelosi, introduced this bill, and it passed. Subsequently, Senate Bill 3752, which is introduced by Senator Cassidy from Louisiana and Senator Menendez from New Jersey, and Congressman Reed from the Southern Tier, that was called the SMART Act. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the distinction between those two bills, but I really want to focus on that middle bill in this list, HR 6748, which is the Direct Support for Communities Act. This is a bipartisan bill sponsored by Congressman Delgado from the Hudson Valley, Congressman Zeldin, who's a Republican from Nassau County, Suffolk County, and Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer. This is the legislation that NACO and NISAC endorse. This is the bill that we want to happen. It provides a formula and a mechanism for unrestricted state and local assistance shared by counties by population. The HEROES Act did include this provision. However, this bill has been declared dead on arrival in the Senate, and the president has threatened to veto. This bill is, it's like that bill I talked about for the pension fund at New York State. This is a starting point for negotiations that the House Democrats have put forward. It includes $187.5 billion for counties and unrestricted aid, $11 billion for all 62 New York State counties to be divided evenly by population. It also includes $500 billion fund for state governments, which is good. We support that because if the state doesn't get money, we know he's going to institute cuts. So the state needs to get funding. Otherwise, we're on the hook. We will be impacted. It also removed the FEMA local match requirement. It restored the T-Band Act, which is a New York City centric proposal, but something that we've endorsed and tried to champion with them. It included a 14% FMAP increase. So on top of the $11 billion in unrestricted aid, it would also increase about 6.5–7% net benefit for FMAP, which, I mean, that would be awesome, but the chances of that happening are really slim to none. And then the HEROES County aid payments would be split over 2 years, 2/3 in year 1, 1/3 in year 2. Okay, so what's the SMART Act? The SMART Act was introduced with 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans in the House and in the Senate. It's a bipartisan bill. It includes $500 billion for states, locals, and tribal governments. So you recall, HEROES Act was 500 billion for states plus 187.5 billion for counties. It also, I should also note, it included 187.5 billion for towns and cities in addition. Okay. This bill has a little lower of an initial out of the gate amount of money, 500 billion for everything. However, the way that this funding formula works, it actually comes out to be New York State getting about 50 to 60 billion, which is about 10 to 12 billion for the 62 counties. However, I want to caution this. Because the formula is tied to the infection rate, as our state infection rate goes down, because we don't have as many COVID-19 positives, in other states, like you've seen Arizona, Texas, Florida, go up in their infection rates, our proportional share of this funding would be reduced. So while it's 10 to 12 billion 2 to 3 weeks ago, it's not going to be 10 to 12 billion if the infection rate continues to improve, which is a good thing. I mean, we don't want people sick, but it would have an impact on how much money we would receive out of this program.
So it's the infection rate as of the date it passes or the date it's signed or something?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. So it's a moving target, and it's a really moving target. There was also language in here, maintenance of effort language, and you're probably saying, well, what does that mean? This was something that Congressman Reed really pushed for, and NYSAC, for political reasons, we're trying to work with the governor on all of this. We're trying to support his request to get funding as well, because we recognize that we don't want to be cut. We could not come out and support this language, and neither could NACO, because it would pit us against the governors, which if we're against the governors, then any deal collapses. I will say that right now. If the big seven are not together on this, we'll never get a deal through the Senate Republicans. It just will not happen. So what this maintenance of effort language said was, New York State, if we're going to give you money, you cannot go in and unilaterally cut state assistance to counties to make up for any loss in whatever revenue you really wanted. So what it basically says is, and it sounds great. I mean, it would be great to put language in there that says New York State or Vermont or Massachusetts, you cannot go and cut the locals to make up your difference. However, again, it really comes down to a strategic issue in getting a bill passed. And this is a sticking point for the National Governors Association. In fact, I will share with you that NACO received a call because from the NGA, and Cassidy and Menendez were on the phone when this happened, and the NGA was screaming at NACO for this language, because they thought that NACO really sponsored it and carried it, which they did not. This was something that Congressman Reed, in really good faith, and Senator Menendez, because he has the same problem in Jersey, wanted to include, because they're trying to protect local governments, and it's a really admirable portion of this bill, but it really puts us in a position that we can't come out and support that, because it pits us against the governor. That's really what it comes down to. So, and I'm just being honest with everyone on the phone. That's where that is. However, that leaves us with these two proposals, and I go back to the Direct Support for Communities Act. That is the NACO and NYSAC messaging. We need direct, unrestricted aid to county governments, ideally shared by population. However, at the end of the day, we know that the discussions are going to happen at the leadership level, right? And as long as we get some unrestricted aid to counties, it's a win. That's how we all have to look at this, because right now we have zero in unrestricted local aid, and we need something. And if it's a combination between the heroes and the smart or whatever, at the end of the day, as long as counties receive some unrestricted aid so we can continue the services and programs that you guys have all worked really hard to do in Tompkins County and your peers across the state, then That's the most important thing. So what we're telling folks is provide hyper-local examples to your member of Congress. Tell them exactly what the impact will be if you do not get unrestricted local aid to counties. What, not like what's the revenue shortfall, because that doesn't connect to them. You know, how many county employees would be impacted by this? What kind of county employees would be impacted? What services to residents would be impacted? Do you have to cut your Meals on Wheels program? Do you have to close county parks? Do you have to, you know, adjust other special event programming that the county may do? Do you have to reduce grants to community and nonprofit organizations? And what does that mean? So if you're reducing a grant to a nonprofit, what nonprofit? What service do they provide? Who in your community will be impacted by that? That's what the member of Congress wants to hear, because then they get scared. They're like, oh, I don't want to get a phone call from Mary or Sue down the street saying that Tompkins County wasn't able to deliver a program because I didn't do something for them. So that's the messaging that we're telling folks. The key, and now I want to talk about timeline, right? This is critical, and I have some time still. The timeline is a very frustrating moving target. If you asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said there was going to be a deal in place by Memorial Day, or I guess 4 weeks ago now. That can got kicked down the road to the end of June. That can got kicked down the road now until the end of August. Congress is on their recess right now, okay? They're going to be on recess for 2 weeks. NACO and NISAC do not believe there's going to be any conversation at all with respect to this until mid to late July. Now, there's some good news for us. A lot of other states, their infection rates are soaring, which is putting pressure on other members of Congress outside of New York. Because remember, look at these bills. They're all sponsored by a member of the New York delegation. And what I was fearful from the onset was, yeah, our delegation is really working hard, and I'm on the phone with them every single day. But there's only 29 members of the New York, well, 28 right now, members of the delegation, and we have 2 senators. We need the other 400 members of Congress plus, or 400 members of the House plus the other 98 senators to get on board with this. So, and that's where NACO comes into play. But as the infection rate of COVID increases, it puts pressure on those members to do what we're asking them to do in New York. So that's good news. But we're really going to be ramping up messaging and providing counties with information when we get a sense of timing, more crystal clear timing from Washington. When do we actually think that something will start ramping up? So I wanted to let you know on that front. That's where we are right now with the federal negotiation. I will say that NACO has told me as of this morning, let me pull up the message here, that they still are hearing that this kind of package will pass in late July. That's their assumption right now. They believe it'll pass the House of Representatives first in late July. It'll be delivered to the Senate in early August, and then the president would act sometime in mid-August. Now, ironically, the president, and this could also benefit us, the president supports aid to local governments. And NISAC just put out an extensive request, and I want to thank Tompkins County for participating, to the White House and to Speaker Pelosi, Leader McConnell, Leader McCarthy, and Leader Schumer, asking for funding for infrastructure priorities, because this is something that tangentially, but it might get lumped together, that the president has really been asking about and really been advocating for. So we put that out as an olive branch, as a nice feel-good piece that we're in partnership with them. And the White House wants to also provide local unrestricted aid to county governments too. We've been told this from the president's staff that we have a relationship with. They've also told us that the president, and you've probably seen this in the newspapers, the president wants to provide another additional stimulus check for individuals who are being impacted by COVID, similar to that one that happened through the CARES Act. So, but that is in conflict to what Leader McConnell wants to do in the Senate. He's not in favor of providing another check. So we have to see how all of these different dynamics, the additional stimulus check, the unrestricted aid for states and locals, and infrastructure, how that shapes and plays together. There's a little bit of posturing going on right now. Everyone's pulling different levers. So that's the update that I have, Martha. I know I talked for a lot. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Oh, Ryan, this is great. And if you want to pull off your screen, we might be able to see.
Sure.
I see Anna's hand, but first let me ask. I mean, we have, sorry, Congressman Reed is our congressman.
Yeah.
And he seems dedicated to the SMART Act formula.
Mm-hmm.
At our last meeting of this committee, we actually looked at the NACO, had a very elegant 2-page table that compared SMART and HEROES.
Yeah.
It did not include the 4728, but whatever that, 6748. We need a new, have to remember that one. But this,
Yes.
according to NACO on that table, the aid to counties came much more directly through the HEROES Act, and SMART actually gave governors much more authority, even though Tom Reed kept really, saying how much he was fighting for counties that they should get direct aid.
Mm-hmm.
Looked like HEROES was doing that, SMART was not. I asked him that directly on a conference call, and he said, "Oh, well, NACO has it wrong. I will call NACO." I was on a call with NACO a couple of days later, and they said, "Well, no, he hasn't called us." So,
Yeah.
it's really a big deal. We have a direct, connection. There's a 12 o'clock tomorrow phone call with Tom Reed. He does these every week or two, and I don't know if we can get him to budge on this, but he seems completely misrepresent. I'm just saying, he seems like he's misrepresenting what his bill would do.
Okay, so NACO and Tom Reed are both correct. And let me explain what that means, right?
Okay.
So NACO is saying that the HEROES Act would give a more equitable and greater benefit to county governments. Across the country, that is absolutely true than the SMART Act. This because it doesn't include the infection rate as part of the formula. It's 100% based on county population. So a little teeny county in Alaska, which may only have 2 people impacted by COVID, would get an equitable amount of money as New York City, who has, a ton of people impacted by COVID. Tom Reed is also correct, though, because at the time that the bill was drafted and when projections were put out for New York State counties, his bill grants the county government about the same dollar amount as the HEROES Act. However, like I mentioned, this is where things change, right? As that infection rate comes down, which it has since the bill came out, that net benefit to counties is also reduced over time. That will happen. The hesitation from NACO is, and I totally understand their position on this. The hesitation from NACO is that there will be some counties, and this was the problem in the CARES Act, right? The CARES Act allocated funding through the Coronavirus Relief Fund for 500,000 plus communities. So Monroe County, win. Erie County, win. Tompkins County, lose. You guys lost along with another 50 counties. So NACO was really frustrated by that because there's only about 115 counties out of 3,000 countrywide that benefited through the CARES Act. They have that same opinion with the SMART Act. They see some counties really benefiting greatly from this and states benefiting greatly from this and others not benefiting so much.
So
Now,
it seems like now we have a better argument with Tom Reed because our infection rate is because of the flipping there. And especially, and I'm just kind of cutting short here so I can I see other questions. Especially if you identify this aid as replacing lost revenue rather than replacing COVID expenses.
Yeah.
They've kind of given us COVID aid to replace COVID expenses. And I've heard that it's really, really difficult to go back on legislative language and make that aid less restrictive. Like that ship has sailed. So to me, if we hinge this on replacing lost revenue, which every county, every town, municipality has lost revenue, then you wash out the changing infection rates. And I think maybe that's an argument we can make with him. That in terms of negotiations, could he please soften this, requirement? And I know it's all about nuance and behind the scenes conversations, et cetera. So if HR 6748 actually accomplishes that, then maybe he could move in that direction.
Yeah. I will say from our perspective, Tom Reed has been an incredible ally of NISAC, trying to push the other members of the Republican delegation within New York State to climb onto this request. So, like I said earlier, if there's some combination between HEROES and SMART, and however the leaders in the room end up solving the political differences, we don't care. We just want to keep the pressure on unrestricted local aid. So,
all right, I think we have our marching orders for the call tomorrow. I got Anna, Deborah, and then Henry. And by the way, I want to say I don't see anybody from administration on the call. So the 5 minutes we had for county administrator's report, that goes away. I also want to make sure you folks know that Diane Miller, although she's on the call, hi Diane, wasn't going to make a report. Charlie Krasansky, hey Charlie, good to see you. We will get to Charlie very shortly. And hi, Diane. And, we can take a few more minutes with these questions to Ryan. This is real important. So Anna, Deborah, and then Henry.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for an amazing presentation. A few questions. One, Martha.
Gotta be really quick, Anna, okay?
Martha hit on part of what I was curious about, but I just wanted to follow up on it a bit. It seems that there are two main issues of the HEROES Act. One is obviously that it's tied to the infection rate. The other is that the total amount is less. So it includes the $500 billion for states, but not the $187.5 billion for the unrestricted aid for counties. So it seems to me that that reduction in total cost combined with the MOE language creates a bit of a Hunger Games between the states and the counties. That is what you were referring to. It seems to me that the MOE language would not be as much of an issue if it didn't also have the reduction in total dollar amount. So, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. And is there any discussion on whether or not the pieces, if there is an amalgam, is there discussion among the Republicans that you have spoken to who are favoring the HEROES Act or the SMART Act, the inclusion of the additional $187 billion for counties?
Yeah, great question, Anna. Thank you. Yeah, so that is the main difference between the SMART Act and the HEROES Act. It's the MOE language and that total dollar amount. If that total dollar amount was increased, then it would be an easier pill to swallow, because The HEROES Act had about $1 billion for state and local governments. When you add in the 187.5 for counties, the 187.5 for towns and cities, and the 500 billion for states, versus the SMART Act, which only has that $500 billion pool. So that's part of it. And then on the MOE language, I'm not sure if there would be a softening on that language if that was part of if that's part of the negotiation at the final day. I'm not 100% sure on that. But and then your last question, as far as are Republicans willing to add that 187.5 billion for counties? That would be an interesting concept. I don't know if we would have to circle back on that. I don't know if they would be willing to add that into their bill. But that's certainly something that I can talk to my peers at NACO about.
That would be great. And then I had another question, just clarification on one of your slides about the PPP, the deadline being extended, but no money added. Is the deadline specifically referring to when people can report out whether they used it and whether there's forgiveness? What is it that's being extended? If not,
yeah, so yeah, let me clarify that. So what's being extended is the date in which they have to file an application. So it was by June 30th that they had to file an application for the small business to take benefit of that PPP program. That's been extended to some point in August now. So as long as as long as they've incurred a hardship during that COVID-19 federal declaration, which is still in effect, and I don't see any reason why the president would not continue that federal declaration. So what it's done is it's just extended that application submission date.
And they've extended it because there's still unallocated funds. He just didn't add any more funding. Do you have any idea how much funding is still available?
Yeah, there's about $140 billion left in that program.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
If people have specific sort of relatively technical questions, Ryan's available by email and responds really fast. So I want to read Diane's comment in chat. I do appreciate Ryan's analysis and agree completely with his assessment of the DC legislative landscape and the need to be as specific as possible when describing local impact. Matt Chase with NACO is a longtime friend and first-rate advocate. Thank you, Diane.
Our offices are in the same building, so I see him all the time.
Yeah, terrific. Henry, did you have your hand up? I don't see it there now.
Yeah, I have specific questions, so I'll email Ryan offline.
All right, thanks, Henry. Deborah.
Yeah, I just had a senior moment, Ryan, when you were mentioning the two individuals in Albany who were key to the budget process. Could you remind me who they were?
Sure. Yeah, Todd Sherman, who is the Secretary of Senate Finance. So he works for Liz Krueger and Andrea Stewart Cousins. And Blake Washington, who's the Secretary of Ways and Means. He works for Helen Weinstein and Speaker Carl Heastie.
And we met with both of them. We've met with both of them a couple times. We met most recently in 100 years ago in February.
On the Medicaid fight. Thank you all.
That's right. I see Rich John and Mike Lane. Rich.
Yeah, I put a question in chat and maybe it's already answered. I joined the presentation on your slide about FMAP, and there's the 2.5 billion and the 1.8 billion. I assume you explained the discrepancy, but I didn't hear. Don't repeat it if you did. I'll get it from somebody else.
I did not, Rich, but great question. The 2.5 billion is what we have been told by our congressional delegation that Medicaid and Human Services, CMS, Center for Medicaid and Human Services, has sent out the door to New York State. New York State is saying we only received 1.88 billion. So the problem is there's no transparency for what we can actually see as far as what has come into the state and how much money they intend to receive or what exactly has occurred. We can't see that on our end. We've asked for clarification and we haven't heard back yet. But so we don't know where the discrepancy really is, but they're talking two different numbers and it is confusing and we don't know the answer.
Not just confusing, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked with NISAC, off and on about, gee, when is NISAC going to sue the state for that 3 years of reconciliation? But I guess we got to hold off on that battle until things settle down a little bit. Mike Lane.
Hi, Ryan. A little off topic here is the governor's executive order requiring all municipalities that have police departments to come up with plans for them. We've already started work on that in Tompkins with our sister municipalities in the county that have police departments. I understand the governor's emergency declaration for COVID. What is he basing this executive order on? Any idea? It just doesn't seem to me related to COVID in any way. And I'm wondering, does he have authority to do anything he wants? Is he an autocrat?
Okay, so I can partially answer that question for you, Mike.
Part of it was rhetorical.
I won't be able to answer on the autocrat, but as far as whether or not this is related to COVID, so the governor has put out a series of executive orders on COVID, and those are Executive Order 202 point, and then all the different COVID-related executive orders. I think it's up to 50 something. This police reform initiative was in response to that package of bills that the legislature passed and the governor has signed, as well as, so he wanted to do something a little more than what the legislature has done. So he issued Executive Order 203, which, you're correct, requires municipalities and counties that have local law enforcement agency, a police agency as defined under the law, if you're a police officer, that they have to develop a plan and it has to be submitted in 2021 in order to continue to receive state assistance. Did you have anything else that I missed on, Mike?
Well, no, I thank you for that. I think it's pretty much what I thought, but my feeling is, how does he relate that to his authority under COVID? Is it, you're saying because of the package that came through the legislature?
No. So, okay, I see what you're talking about. You're talking about the legal authority to issue this. There's definitely some folks who do not believe that the governor has the legal authority to issue this executive order. I don't know, I don't think NISAC is going to opine on that particular issue. Certainly, I'll bring that back to our council and have Pat Cummings, who's kind of taken a lead on this. I'll share with him your concerns, Mike.
Thank you. I'm just asking. Thank you.
Yeah. But there's some differing opinion out there whether or not the governor has the legal authority to require and withhold state assistance to a county if they don't comply with this executive order. It's ambiguous. We're not sure.
Thanks.
Good question, but I do think it's an opportunity for us. We are sort of taking it on as sort of directive to reach out and collaborate with our other law enforcement entities, including at the higher education institutions, and really work as intentionally as we can and collaboratively as we can to do better. So I appreciate the question and the interest in the legal authority, but we've already started. We've already convened one meeting on that whole project. Ryan, this has really been terrific, and we really appreciate your being here. Please tell Steve thanks for letting us have you for this long. You're certainly welcome to stay. I would suggest folks read the entire PowerPoint that he sent, because there are a lot of details in there that you may want to follow up on particular bills that passed. And we didn't even talk about marijuana. So
Just one last note, Martha. If anyone is interested in seeing a webinar of this presentation, or if you have specific questions on some of the fiscal impacts, please reach out to Dave Lucas. He's the
Okay.
resident NISAC expert.
All right. Thanks a million, Ryan. You're welcome to stay, but we certainly understand you have other things to do besides talk to us. So we really appreciate your being here.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan. I see the two wonderful reps from Cornell. The floor is yours, whether you want to share or just go with Charlie. I know as you both emailed me last week, big announcement from Cornell about what your plans are for the fall. So go for it. The floor is yours.
So I'm going to defer to Charlie on this because so much more of this action takes place in Albany than it does in Washington, D.C. And I will say Ryan gave a tremendous legislative update that I don't think I could add a single thing to other than that your priorities are our priorities because, you know, we're all part of the same community. And so we want, you know, we don't thrive if you don't thrive. So for that, Charlie.
Thanks
Thanks,
so much,
Diane,
Dan.
and thanks, Martha. So as Martha said, I mean, yesterday we made, Martha Pollock made our big announcement, and I was very involved on the campus plan, the restart. So if anybody wants to ask me anything about that, I might know the answer. And then, just like Diane said, boy, I've been at Cornell for almost 30 years. And there have been many things we've done actually from energy to buildings to you name it. And we've been through a lot, in 30 years. There have been, hurricanes, and there have been power issues, and there have been a lot of things going on. And of course we have the vet school, and we've been through, at least bioterrorism drills. We've thought about existential threats. What could force this place to shut down? We talked a lot about it from time to time. We never imagined that, I don't think anybody really thought it through, that a governor or a government would have this kind of control, like a light switch, on and off, where we always imagined it would be something, coming in the mail, that's how, or an animal showing up. We've had things like that at Cornell that all of a sudden we think this has to be sent, to this lab. We shouldn't have this on campus. Let's do that. But so this is very different for us, all of us. We're all learning this, but it is sort of fascinating to see that the constraints that we're under, how much we don't know about the future. This is not about us. It's really, this virus is pretty unpredictable. Nobody really knows the future, but we're doing, I think, the best we can. And again, we're planning ahead, hopefully. As I've said, I say people into Albany, where some people have sort of quizzed us, and they look back, and a month ago, the University of California system said they were just going to be remote. A few other schools did that as well. And we thought a lot about it, talked a lot about it. But again, the more we looked at it, the more detailed we looked at it, that would be sort of that's easy to do. But it turned out not only is it not optimal for education, for people giving the education and people, learning, and for research and these other things we all care about, it's certainly not optimal for Ithaca, Tompkins County, and New York State. But then it turned out from the analysis that we had done that it even wasn't the smart thing to do when it comes to the safety and health of people in and around Ithaca, Tompkins County, New York State, and even the students themselves. So anyway, we can talk more about it if you want. But so we have a plan. Martha made the announcement yesterday. A lot more detail, as far as the timing of things to come. But so we're proceeding and hoping for the best. And I can obviously talk about what I know about Albany and what might happen and what's possible and how it affects, the county, the city, Cornell.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Charlie. Appreciate that. I'll just go to Anna. She got a question or a comment?
Thanks, Charlie. Really appreciate all your work. I know you've been working on this tirelessly along with everybody else. I had a few questions. I've been getting a lot of comments and a lot of concerns from constituents. I haven't been able to answer their questions fully. I know that you're in the beginning stages of creating protocols. So that's one of the things that I've been communicating. But I'll share one of the main concerns, which is that New York State has worked very hard. We've had, economic repercussions of our choice to really go on pause and reopen very slowly. And we've had successful reduction in our rates. But Cornell students come from all over the country, including many states that have not made any of these efforts. And so there's this general feeling of we worked our butts off. We've had these repercussions, and now, because of other states' decisions, it's going to be undermined. So I guess I'm just responding to what we're going to do specifically with students coming from those states, and in general, how we're going to protocols for protecting the community, and particularly elders in the community. I'm hearing from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll tell you a few things, and there may be more. So a few things we're definitely doing. So we are working on having students, not just from those states, but from anywhere outside of Ithaca, test, or even I don't even know if it applies to even students who live in Ithaca, but anyone coming to campus. So this is students living on campus and off campus. That they would get a test before they arrive in Ithaca. They would show us this proof of a negative test. Then once in Ithaca, this is every student, not just the ones living on campus. And then every student would then, we're staggering it out. So people show up on a certain day. So over the course of like 2 weeks, these students would show up, and each day testing sort of 400 or 500 people. So, and then after you've gotten the negative test in, let's say, Louisiana or Massachusetts, you show up, again, that's like seven to 10 days before you show up, you have a negative test. Then you arrive in Ithaca. Then you take a test, in Ithaca. That test is either a same day or the next day it comes back. You're not allowed on campus. Actually, for that day, we're going to give each student a room just for that one day while we're waiting to hear back if they're negative for the second time. If they're negative for the second time, it's like, welcome to Cornell. You can come onto campus and move into your room if it's on campus, and your stuff and that kind of thing. Parents, nobody can come onto campus until we've put these students through the 2 tests and they're negative on both. So that's just for everybody. For these states, like you were saying, with the high incidence of disease, the governor has this 14-day quarantine in place. And so we're talking to him about exactly how that'll work. We think it would make beautiful sense for us to be able to tell these students from Texas, let's say, you have to self-quarantine. Think about it, right? So you're coming from Massachusetts, which is not on the list, or you're coming from Syracuse, okay? And then you're getting on a bus, let's say, or a train from Boston, or the train, train and a bus and whatever. That's another way of getting it. Not just your home state, but also the travel is an issue. So to put everybody on equal footing from, let's say, Alaska or Texas or Watertown, we think that if those states that are on that list right now, if they self-quarantine at home for 14 days so they don't have it locally, then if they come here, we're going to test them anyway. So we like the governor's 14-day quarantine thing. We think they should serve the quarantine, back home. And then that way, everybody's got equal risk of getting it in transit. So two negative tests for us before anybody's permitted out of that single room or onto campus or even just, part of the campus community. And every day for the semester or even longer, this is a state requirement, that every employee and every student would have a daily check where they would answer these questions, or they're not permitted on the computer network and they can't come onto campus.
One other question for you, Charlie.
And I really want to move.
It's
And I
really
really
short, Martha. Can I just have access to the epidemiologic study? Because I have some questions about the factors.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
I'll send it to you. Yeah, that was on the website, and I'll send it to you.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Henry, did I lower your hand by accident?
No, I did not have my hand up.
Okay, I got Mike Sigler. If somebody else had their hand, oh, Sean, I'm sorry. Yes, Shauna, go ahead, and then Mike.
Okay. Hi, Charlie. I actually traveled to Texas last week, drove up, got back in town Monday, and I have some concerns about the plan that you're talking about, because what ends up happening, Texas and Arkansas are the two states that are currently on the list. And the way that I'm seeing it, I'm in a hotel right now, staying away from my family. Whenever I entered into town, I got my test, got the results 24 hours later. It's still negative.
Right.
But the reality is if there is a 14-day period that my last day in Arkansas was Saturday, then I could be contagious. And so I guess my concern is the 14 days that you're talking about. Kids really need to be in isolation away from other kids, or else you're going to have a petri dish of all of these kids that could be contaminated even after receiving that negative first test. And you're collecting them together. And I fear that there could be some gaps there, and you're going to see a lot of positives of kids congregating together.
Yeah, so I think the current plan is at least 7 days before you show up to Ithaca, you have a negative test, 7 days or more, right? I think 7 to 10 days. You show up, then you take another test, and if you're then negative again, yes, then boom, okay? Then you're okay. That's 2 tests, 7 to 10 days apart, negative. So
I get the first test. It doesn't seem safe to me, because I mean, quite honestly, I could have gotten COVID Saturday in the hotel in Arkansas,
right,
or pulling over at the gas station, and it would not have been detected whenever I got here Monday.
So, and I should add this, and then 5 days after, we're planning every 5 days to test everybody.
Okay.
So, so a student 7 days before, like we're talking we're saying day 0, we're calling it.
Yeah.
So 7 days before day 0, that's the first day in Ithaca, you take a test, you're negative. You show up, you take another test, you're negative. You walk around. 5 days later, another test.
Okay.
Every 5 days, it's a lot more testing than anybody else is contemplating.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. And I know that, it went from 8 states and now it's 14 states. And I will tell you, being in Texas and Arkansas, traveling up to Tennessee, people aren't wearing masks. They don't care. I mean, literally, it is the Wild West down there. And, I think we need to take this, really seriously, because people are being very, very dangerous and not cautious. And so, take it as you may.
So we also, I should just say on that real quick, on the mask thing, we have this policy that we're going to enforce at Cornell, that even if you're anywhere on the campus, you have to have a mask on, unless you're within more than 6 feet away from somebody outside. You can actually drop it off your mouth and nose, but it always has to be on you. And if you're inside any building of any size, even if you're alone in the building, you have to have it on. The only time in a building you can take it off is if you're in your room with your roommate or alone, or in your office alone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Henry, then Rich. I'm sorry, wait. Mike Sigler was on the list. Go ahead, Mike, and then Henry and Rich.
That's fine, Martha. Hey, Charlie, how are you doing? It's interesting to hear you go through it. I'm going to Puerto Rico on Sunday, and it's interesting. A lot of the protocols you just laid out is exactly what they're saying are going to happen there. You land, you get a test, the whole 9 yards. I have 2 basic questions for you. It was my understanding, number one, was that you were going to try to keep people on campus as much as you could. Is that? I guess I'm kind of curious how that's going to happen.
Yeah, so I'll tell you how it's going to happen. We can't keep them on campus, but so we've compressed the schedule so that they don't have long weekends. There are going to be more classes, sort of more time, because we have to break classes down. So they'll be more spread out. So people will have, like I said, no 3-day weekends. everything physically ends on before Thanksgiving. You go home, you don't come back. Nobody comes back to campus. So there's really no natural break for people who live any distance away to get away. We're strongly discouraging anybody from going. We're talking about 50 miles or something like that to make it easy. We're just making it so that if anybody, these are students, but also it applies to, let's not forget, we got faculty and staff who are also, younger, like to, travel, go places on weekends, do things. This applies to everybody. Everybody knows that every day there's this check-in that you have to answer. Have you been to any high, cases with places with high? If you say yes, you're gonna be on the phone talking to somebody. Where did you go? How much time did you spend? What did you do when you were there? And what? We don't think it's wise for you to be on campus today until you're tested again. Stay away or self-isolate. So every day that's happening for everybody. So everybody's going to be taught by what we tell them and what they see, signs, everything. It's keep it low risk. We're all in this together. The last thing we want is this thing to spread and then you be sent home early. And so visitors are like virtually no visitors, no visiting faculty, no class visiting, lecturers, no on-campus tours. They're all virtual. They are now. They are strongly discouraged anybody from even just, dropping by. There are other things too, all alumni, the board of trustees, all those meetings, virtual, nothing in person. I don't even know about athletics. I don't know that we've decided yet, but there's a lot of discussion going on about no intercollegiate athletics. And then any event on campus that would bring in anybody from off campus, it's no more off-campus visitors to anything. We're doing everything sort of a combination of virtual and in person or just virtual. And so this again, the issue of faculty, staff, and students just going to New York City and coming back or doing something like that, strongly discouraged, and the schedule is going to make it really hard for people to even just get away. Even the campus bus, we're not running that this semester. Yep.
No, thank you.
Yeah, listen, I'm gonna,
I just had one more quick one. Is that all right?
we're way behind. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. The other question is just, since you're our largest employer, basically, you must have a lot of, and I'm hoping to get a lesson from yourself and Cornell about this. You must have a lot of employees with children. And we have not seen any guidance for K through 12 yet. And I didn't know if Cornell was out ahead of the curve on this in your planning on what are your workers going to do. I'm really hoping for a lesson on maybe what can be done there.
I can tell you that K-12, there's been no real guidance from the state. They're just starting to work on it. I know that my local school district here is just putting a group together to work on it. And I think they're sort of waiting till, I would say, the last minute just to see what the situation is, on the ground with this virus, to see what they can and can't do. And I know that, so I'm just assuming just because I've been around, right? I'm just assuming K-12 is going to be in person. And I think it's going to be a bunch of split schedules, some remote, but kids physically, I would say at least half the time, people in the classrooms. That's my guess. But we just felt like we were under the gun too to make decisions. And I think maybe decisions like ours feed into those decisions locally. I think they might be sort of, like you said, I don't think we could do one thing and then have K-12 do something totally different. So somebody had to go first. And I just think that what we're doing is the best thing we think right now we can do. And I hope K-12 figures it out and we all get back to, again, as close to normal as we can, but with all these safety measures in that might be with us for a good amount of time, but I think it's doable.
All right, we're gonna have to try to speed it up, but I have a couple questions as well. So let's go to Henry, then Rich, then my questions.
Yes, thank you, Charlie. Yesterday, Martha's statement came out. It went on my listserv. People are still not happy with the results. They're worried about people off campus. and what they're going to be doing and how they're going, what protocols are going to be in place and how they're going to ensure, because they said there's parties now going on all weekends. So how are they going to stop people? They said signing a statement is not going to be enough.
That's right. So we are in the same boat. You know, we can educate people. It's a lot of it's maybe more like group behavior. It's been said, you know, Shauna said it. You're coming from, let's say, Texas, and you haven't worn a mask at all, and nobody does in your little town. You show up. We're really banking on, once people get here, we're going to be lecturing them. We're going to be using different techniques, you know, student to student, but also, you know, the authority that we have in, you know, we're going to have sort of a little bit of a penalty thing. Again, like, you know, we're going to be also monitoring a lot on campus to make sure they're behaving on campus, and then trying to extend that off campus as much as we can and have it so that these students really behave, because we are also going to let them really understand that if they don't, and it results in, you know, a little bit of an outbreak, that could spread and of course jeopardize it for everybody. The last thing anybody wants. So a lot of that is also educating people who may not have been educated about what this is and how serious this is, based on where some of them are from. So it's a lot of that we're planning to do. And then, like I said, imposing as much as we can, requiring certain things, having them really understand what it takes. And hey, you're here, behave. So.
I see Gary's smiling face. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so thanks. And I hope we can maintain some level of optimism about a student code of conduct off campus until we actually see it, for starters. We hope to have a large-scale community Zoom meeting next week, hopefully with our provost and some other folks. So you'll all be invited to that. And people need to hear from our neighbors. That's all we've been doing. We'll continue to do it. And we had a meeting last week with Cayuga Heights, and we brought students to the meeting. And that's been so powerful, student leadership. So student leaders need to hear from the neighbors and vice versa. So we'll continue on that track. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I was going to ask about that. That's great. Rich.
Yeah, Charlie, I did want to say thank you for the report that Cornell prepared. It was really thoughtful and detailed and does answer a lot of the questions. I had a question sort of following up on what Henry was asking, which seems that for the Collegetown area, which is my district, we want to have a seamless and coordinated connection between Cornell and the county health department. And I assume that's part of the planning, that the response will be the same whether a student's on campus or in an apartment.
Yep.
But the party bringing that message to the table may be the county or Cornell. Is that the case?
Yes, and Gary may want to talk about this too. We're doing everything in partnership with them. You know, they are the authority, you know, so they're the ones who pretty much, you know, have it's their jurisdiction, this whole thing. So everything we're doing, even on campus, we're checking, is this what you want us to do? Is this how you want us to, is this okay if we isolate a student this way? Is this permitted? So they're the ones really telling us how to do things, and we're doing things together. And Gary can tell you, we're coordinating our messages too, right, Gary?
Yeah, every day. And I don't think we're telling our story well enough, Rich. So, I mean, I think these are common questions and they're good questions. And we're doing a lot of really solid work that's never been done before, but I don't think we're telling it well enough. And we'll continue to try to work on that so people know what we're doing and who we're talking to, but we're joined at the hip with the health department every single day.
Yeah, we also, I should just say, you know, so the big picture, you're exactly right. What we're talking about right now is really a deal breaker. You know, this is where the rubber meets the road. And we at Cornell are talking about trying to get the governor even to come in and either do like a personalized video for these students. Again, they're coming in from somewhere else. This guy, he's earned his authority in this area, and have someone who, maybe some of them will listen. If they're not listening to anybody else, maybe they listen to him. It's, hey, you're in New York now. I'm your governor here. Let me tell you what we've been through hell. you know what? We're on the other side of it, but it's only because all of us did the right thing, and you're here now, and you have to do the same. And so again, we're seeing if he would do that for Cornell, for maybe something that could be used at all the schools that are bringing students here, and even New York students going to school. You know, maybe you grew up in Syracuse, you're going to school in Ithaca. You know what? Different town, but still, you're a responsible party. Grow up.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be great if the governor could also add in a message about the census when he does that, and make sure that they fill out the census, and if it's been filled out with their address at their parents' house in April, they can refill it out
That's right.
with their college town, with their Ithaca address. So
Great idea.
I got a couple quick things, and we really, really appreciate this. Gary, I think if, a big Zoom meeting is great, maybe more than one, because, there'll be.
We've been doing community meetings every week, and if you want me to bring some students to a county legislature meeting, I'd be glad to do that too.
That would be wonderful. Talk to Leslin about that. I mean, I think your 9 o'clock on Friday morning meetings are, at a busy time. So all this testing that you're doing, are you doing this separately from Cayuga Medical? Do you have your own process, or, and same with contact tracers? Are you setting up your own?
So contact tracing is actually the responsibility of the county health department.
Okay.
They have a system, it's connected to a state system. They're all trained that way. We and other schools, some of these other universities and Cornell, early on, we said, because contact tracing is so critical, okay? So a bunch of us said to the state, we think that it would be smart for us to sort of supplement that. They don't want us to do a separate. They have said, if you have staff people, you have, employees who want to go through the training, great. So there are a bunch of Cornell, employees who are trained, who are sort of ready to be activated if that's needed. But yeah, that's a responsibility of the state, the county health department, under the state rubric that the governor arranged through this. I'm forgetting. It's a big professional consortium with software and training and the whole deal. Yep.
Okay, and then the testing, and will your numbers feed into the county's numbers?
Yeah, definitely. So it's where you're a resident. So let's say somebody's a resident of Schuyler County and they're a Cornell employee and they test positive. Boom, that's a Schuyler number, first of all, Schuyler County. So the see if I get this right, Gary. Cayuga Medical Center is actually, they're in charge of the testing. They're in charge of the tracking, the details, all of the data, and the county health department, they get the results. They're sharing the results with us, because again, it's like if somebody's working or a student at Cornell, we know the classes the person was in, where that person works, but it's being done. I don't even know physically. I know so far it's been done at the vet school. I don't know where its future is going to be done every day when it really scales up. But so far, it's been going really well. But yes, Cayuga Medical Center is technically in charge of the testing.
Okay, so you set up that's interesting. You set up a separate site at the vet school.
We did, yeah.
Okay, because I know faculty, for example, you were tested hundreds of, okay.
Yep.
And then at the end, when we get results, those will feed into the county's numbers for.
If it's a county, that's right. Correct.
The
If it's a
students
county
or
resident.
residents.
Yep.
So
Okay.
Martha, I can actually answer that as well. So I did my test yesterday by Cayuga Health Partners at the mall. And I just received a call this morning, and it was from Cayuga Health Partners on behalf of the Tompkins County Health Department partnering. And so it was an employee from Cayuga Health Partners.
Okay, great. Well, it's great to hear if you've got some staff to help feed into that, because there are a lot of numbers here. And you probably, I'm sure you know that about a minute after I got Gary's email with Martha Pollock's announcement. Tompkins County's press release went out sort of supporting what Cornell was doing. So yeah, we're kind of working definitely hand in glove on this. And I think nobody expects this to be flawless. Nobody expects this to be easy. I think we also don't expect it to be permanent, so we can get through this. And
Right.
it's an important thing, really, really important thing to do. And I'm just so impressed with the thoughtful, fact-based way New York and the university have taken this on as a whole. So we'll get through this, and we deeply appreciate all of the ways in which Cornell has really collaborated and supported the community throughout this. So thanks a million. Really appreciate you being here. We're quite far behind, but let's move. We can move quickly through the rest of our agenda. Did you have anything else? Okay.
Just good luck with everything you guys are doing.
All right, and thanks to Diane for working with TCAT on the transit authorization bill, and we're really appreciating your help with that. So let's see, let's go speed dialing through the rest of the agenda. My report, I will send you a letter that Natalie Bernatsky at Workforce Development Board. I think you have the final letter that she sent to the to the federal officials on workforce development funding. She's also got a letter to New York State about youth employment program funding. I'll send that to you. I also heard from Sue Dale Hall about childcare funding. The governor has released the 65 million additional in childcare funding, but there's 69 million left from the CARES Act. They also have some issues with how the 65 was set up, the deadlines, relatively technical. But she's given me, I've gotten names of a couple people in the governor's office that maybe we can kind of push on individual second floor folks on that. TCOG report, I went to TCOG last week because she was having a great time in Houston. Dallas. No, I was happy to go to TCOG. And they did pass two motions. I don't have the language of those yet, but one was on legislature terms, asking that the legislature reconsider the vote on not doing anything on a local law and not doing anything to have a shorter term starting in 2021. Also, they passed a motion asking that the governor extend the executive order on remote public meetings. If you think about most of the town and village halls and city council boardrooms that we're all familiar with, their rooms are even smaller than ours. And you know, we have issues with how many people can fit into our rooms safely, our chambers. So they're very concerned about that. And I've reached out to Melissa DeRosa and the secretary to the governor to see if we can get that executive order extended. You know, it's interesting when stuff is done by executive order, like relatively easy to push on it and try to get something through. So, and then just finally, in the agenda, you have the New York Times article that I found on comparing the two versions of police reform measures. We obviously don't have time to talk about those today, but I wanted us to have that on our radar too, so that we're not just talking about money, but also that kind of a policy issue. And if we want to take that up next month, we could. And finally, for the next meeting, Sarah Clark, who's the regional representative for Senator Gillibrand, has agreed to join our meeting. And I was also thinking of asking Barbara Lifton to come on as a, you know, sort of give us your wisdom on the way out the door kind of part of our meeting. That's my report. So any questions on any of that? Shauna?
Yeah, I have a question about the resolution from TCOG. What exactly was the resolution? Who brought it forward? I had not heard of that, and it wasn't on the agenda.
Right, it was a motion made on the floor, and I have asked, I think it's Katrina, I wasn't sure if you were the one who staffed, I can't remember if you staffed the TCOG last week.
I did staff it, and I can go ahead and send them out to all legislators later today.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. I had asked for the language and it hadn't,
We're trying to get everything caught up there, but
Okay.
I'll get it out today.
thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome.
So I had asked you to sub in for me. I guess I'm just wondering where this resolution came from because you're not a voting member and you wouldn't have been able to bring it forward. So how did that
That's
happen?
right. I didn't vote. I told them things that are happening at the county. And that was one that was an issue that was happening at the county. And I just thought that because it does affect towns directly, I thought that they should know about it.
Shauna.
I didn't vote. So, Mike Sigler, do you have a vice chair's report? Can't hear you, Mike.
Sorry. I don't have much of a report. Tom Reed is actually having a meeting. It probably just finished, but he was having it at the same time as this meeting with all the elected officials. So I'll get a briefing on that later, and I can bring that to you guys when I get it. I do know that he is focusing on the childcare issue. Is looking at Tompkins County, is in contact with some of the childcare providers here. The K through 12 thing I know is on his radar as well. That seems to be what a lot of people are talking about. Certainly, I mean, we're just 11 weeks out now. So people are kind of wondering what's going to happen there. I know certain people who are talking about actually sending their kids out of state to go to school. So I don't know. Anyway, so that's really the whole report I have. Sorry.
Thanks, Mike. Isn't that elected officials call is tomorrow at noon?
I thought there was another one today, but maybe that one's tomorrow and then there's one today.
There might be probably more than one. Okay.
There's one
I don't
tomorrow.
know.
The one for Allison Hunt sent the note.
Tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, so that one's tomorrow. But I thought there was one today too. But okay, yeah, tomorrow. So
I'm sure there are many.
yeah.
All right, thank you. In your packet, I also included the request from NISAC, from Jackie Deirdrick. They do resolutions, of course, as we all know, for their standing committees. Jackie Deirdrick. We all received this last week. They're moving up the fall schedule. They're having, instead of a September in-person conference, they're having some kind of virtual fall seminar. They're going to hold committee meetings at the end in August, it appears. I think that's when they're doing it. And they want to have resolutions. Okay, they're asking for resolutions by Friday. They're going to move forward resolutions that we passed in prior years. But I just want to give everybody a heads up. Often we get these notices and we think, oh, gee, why didn't we pass a resolution on this or that? So if you have interest in putting forward a resolution, if you think there's a topic we should weigh in on, people can work on those between now and Friday. And I would encourage you to do that, to take a few minutes and think about that. I'd be willing and happy to help anybody if they want to put forth something to one of the committees. So is there anybody interested in thinking about any of that? Any of those committees? Okay. All right. Yeah, because we've got nothing else to do. Now, Tiger committee goals. We never get any time to talk about our committee goals, but if you look at packet page 12, I got comments from a few of you, and I put everything into this document. And there was, there's some things that, are the typical stuff, a couple of things that we might not all agree on, but I would just invite conversation. Does anybody have comments on how to organize our goals, or whether we just we can just keep going as we are? It's up to this committee. Mike Lane, then Deborah.
I think we talked a little last time, Martha, that this committee is really difficult to pick certain goals. I mean, do we say, hey, we want to have the phase 4 of the federal legislation passed, and we want to work on that? I mean, we're doing that. Do we want to have information about Cornell opening the census? We're doing that. So I don't really know how basically a lobbying committee sets goals unless it just says, well, this happened, therefore we accomplished it. And you really can't say that either.
That's true. And if it fails to happen, we can't say, well, we failed. But Deborah.
Yeah, I had the same problem that Mike just mentioned, is we can set a goal that's related to a particular legislative outcome, but since we don't ultimately control that outcome, how do you measure, what's the metric for whether or not you achieved your goal? Which is why the one I suggested was that we, as you put it, Martha, establish wider relationships with Albany and Washington, because as it stands now, all of those relationships tend to congregate around you and now perhaps Anna. And we need, we each need to establish relationships of our own.
Well, I agree with that. And I think these conversations, seems to me, it feels like that's happening with the kind of participation we've had from outside county. One thing I would ask, on this federal bill, I would be willing to work on a resolution that takes up NISAC's push for, was it HR 6738 or whatever, to 6748. And if we could add that, it's too late to get it on the agenda for Tuesday night, but we could have it added to the agenda. If folks think that would be worth doing, I'd be happy to put together a text and work with anybody on that. I think it'd be timely to do that and really important. Does that seem like worth doing? Would people support that initiative? I got a Juan. I got a Deborah. Anybody else? Henry?
Well, since the Congress is not going to take it up at the end of July, do we have to do it this week? Can we do it at the mid-July meeting? There's a mid-July meeting, right?
What is our July 7th legislature meeting?
Yeah, but is there also a meeting on July 21st?
Yeah, but my thinking is that the sooner we get it passed, it gets shipped to various places. It might get picked up by other counties as well. I think those discussions are going on right now. I also think, we really do have, I would say, unique leverage with one of the key players, with Tom Reed. And if we can influence him to soften away from the specifics of the SMART Act and move him more towards the middle, more something accepting something different, then it's worth giving that a shot. So I'm willing to put the time in on it, and I'll send it to everybody on the committee, and you all can edit, revise it. That's okay. That seemed worth doing. Okay. Any opposition to that? Okay. Very good. Mike, Sigler, you talk about reopening of K-12. Boy, I know how important that is. I just don't know what we can do about it. Should I look to try to have somebody from one or more of the school districts come to this conversation? Would that be worth our time?
Sure.
It's not. What? Tell you what. What, Henry?
Sure. And by the time of the next meeting, they should know where they stand.
I hope so. Right.
Is it up to
What
them
about-
or is it going to come from Albany?
What about Jeff Madison?
Well, he has to do with the BOCES program, but not not the typical K-12.
Yeah, but he knows about what all the districts are doing.
That's true. Okay.
Well, I repeat my question, Martha. Is it up to the districts or is this a guidance that's coming from Albany?
Yes.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I will keep this on my radar as we put the next agenda together, and if it feels like it would be useful to have somebody from either Jeff or somebody from ICSD as the biggest district in the county, I can try to get somebody to join the meeting. So, okay. If anybody has any other comments on committee goals, I don't mind like not exactly passing committee goals unless there's a call to do that. I don't think anybody.
Goals are overrated.
Goals are overrated. Yeah, Mike Sigler.
Sorry, my computer went out for a bit. I mean, I guess you don't have to set committee goals. The one reason, I don't know if anybody spoke on this, so if I repeat anything. Last year we were so effective with goals. It was a good thing to have. So like the airport was a set goal, not having an incinerator was a set goal, getting a third court judge was a set goal. And so when somebody came to town, like when the governor would come to town, all the legislators were talking about the same thing. So it gave it a sense of, wow, this is something the county's really behind. And I think that's why you were able to kind of accomplish so much. So again, I don't know if there's something in these lists that we all could actually get behind. I mean, obviously Medicaid is always going to be a thing. Have the state take over Medicaid. I don't know how much more we can say that to the governor, but and sometimes it takes a long time of saying something before it actually happens. So that was just my general feeling of the goals.
That's a good way to think about it, Mike. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I think we can identify goals and communicate them. I mean, identify issues and communicate them to the rest of the legislature, certainly. I just had a difficult time with the idea of setting a goal that ultimately we couldn't control the outcome. But Mike's point is a good one for a change.
Martha?
Yes, Mike. Yeah, Mike.
Maybe later in the year, we ought to think about, does the county need a lobbyist in Albany? Do we need to spend some money there? Or are we sufficiently represented with the folks that we've been listening to here in this committee who have been talking to us? Just something to throw out there to think about. That's all.
Okay. All right. I got it down. All right. Everybody chew on this and let's talk about it on, through email or any other way, because we haven't done this kind of a committee before. And every year is probably going to be different. I think the big nut to crack this year is obviously state and local funding. But that sure doesn't mean that's the only goal. So I think, TCAT capital money is obviously also a goal.
But should we also maybe have a set plan to meet with other elected officials? Like, part of that system, we meet with the Assemblywoman every 3 months, meet with the mayor's office every 3 months.
Okay. I can put that down too. And let's start I'll see if I can bring Sarah Clark and Barbara Lifton in at the next meeting. That almost will take up kind of as much time as we can delegate. We may not need a Cornell report every month, every month.
Yeah.
May want to bring IC in, that sort of thing. So, all right, that's a good idea, Henry, to actually bring the elected officials in as well. So,
Martha, I think it's worth observing, look, as Mike said, we've never had a committee like this before. But so far, I have found the agendas that you've put together and the information from these meetings very, very helpful. It's certainly one of the most interesting meetings I have in a month. So thanks for that.
good. I find them interesting and I really go fast too. So obviously. All right, I appreciate that. So really just, anytime, send me suggestions. Hey, why don't we bring in so-and-so and we'll see what we can do. All right. We got minutes from May 6th and June 3rd, and appreciate Katrina doing major heavy lifting on documenting all the information that we got at those two meetings. Thank you, Katrina. So sorry that you didn't get that earlier, but that's all in your inboxes now. So I see Mike, you moved both of them. Mike Sigler moved both of them. See, you're not on.
Nod, Mike, nod.
Mike, you voted. All right. Deborah, are you moving both?
I'm moving both.
Okay. All right. Okay. Somebody second. Henry, you second both of them? Yeah.
I thought we weren't on the committee until we're appointed.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's true.
I'm happy to, Martha.
I'll second.
Thanks, Anna. All right. All right. I'm going to call for a vote. You're right, Mike Lane. Sorry about that. So on both minutes, Mike Sigler, think you can unmute yourself? Mike Sigler?
He disappeared again.
All right. Deborah?
Yes.
All right. Anna?
Yes.
Shauna? On the minutes?
Yes, please.
I vote yes. And do we have Mike Sigler back?
No, I think we've lost him.
Oh, we've
I
lost.
think that snarky comment I made was just one step too far.
All right. So the minutes are passed with 4-0. All right. Thank you all very much for a good discussion and a good meeting. And stay tuned. We'll be adjourned. Thanks, Katrina.
Thanks, Martha. Thanks.
Lauren.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.
Everyone, thanks, Martha.
Yep, you bet.